right. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I have the pleasure to do the awkwardness of trying to dim the room down, and a hush falls over. Yes, it's so awkward. I love it. Happy to be here. Hey, super excited to be here. Super excited that you all are here. We're going to have an excellent night tonight. And before we get started with our program, got a couple of housekeeping things we want to first kick off with. First and foremost, people got food? Yes? You got food? Food, drink, all the things. Yeah, get a hand to the church. Thank you, Same Alliance. If for any reason you have the food and you need to use the lavatories, they're right outside in this direction. They got signs. You can see it. You can go there, do your thing. And if you need Spanish translation as well, we have that provided for you too, and would love for you to share about that. Oh, my bad.
Dos cositas antes de que comencemos, que si gustan, por favor, tomen algo de tomar, algo de comer. Si necesitan usar el baño, entonces es esta salida aquí a la izquierda, a mi izquierda. Y luego, y si hay alguien que necesita traducción en español, por favorcito, ¿me pueden alzar la mano? Ok, perfecto, gracias.
All right. Well, once again, we want to say thank you to Salem Alliance Church for hosting us today. Can we give Salem Alliance a hand, please? Yes, and we have quite a few community partners as well who helped put on this event too. You'll probably hear a little bit about their work and at the tables and in this conversation. But we just want to welcome you to this listening session, this community listening session here, talking more specifically about the neighborhoods across the region this evening. And so before we begin, just give yourselves a hand for being here. So thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. What it shows is that we all really truly care about our neighborhoods. We care about a sense of community, a sense of belonging for everybody within the neighborhoods that we live in. So your presence here is really essential to that step in ensuring that the community members we have a better life here in this community. My name is Ray. That's me right there. Yes, leadership coach, among many other names, but excited to be here to be one of your hosts for this evening. And this whole session was co-created by a new coalition called the Community Working Group, which is a new partnership between community members, social service providers, and law enforcement officials that work to reduce violence, build police community trust, and improve outcomes for high-risk individuals. Developed our agenda for this event tonight. So can we give that group a hand, please? Now, you may be wondering, I had no idea this group existed. That's pretty awesome. How can I join, right? I know everybody has that burning sensation question in your heart. Well, truly, there will be opportunities for anybody who is willing to join and be a part of that group as well. And so when the opportunity does present itself at the end of the summer, you should see more communication about how can you be involved in this work, not only just for these types of conversations, but in our neighborhoods as well. So the members of this group were formed by a consultant, shout out to Ben, working with the police department based on doing some listening with our community in the spring and began with this initial group. But enough about me. Let's talk with our co-host.
Okay. Thanks, Ray. Hey, everybody. Hi. It's good to be with so many friends tonight. My name is Kyle Dickinson. I'm the incoming executive director for Salem Leadership Foundation. And I'm also here to support us tonight so that we can move through our agenda, get you out on time, get you back to what you were doing before. The purpose of tonight's listening session is to get community input about how community violence is happening in our communities and how we can understand the problem just a little bit better. While the police department and the city government have the quantitative data in a report, we also have our stories. We have that qualitative data. We also need to add this into the report. So we're going to be gathering that and creating more of a robust report. So the outcome tonight, again, is to create that evaluation report that will inform strategies that will be led by both community members and the police department. So that can include us here in this room. So we can move from conversation and discussion to direct action. That's coming. So here's what our agenda looks like for tonight. Number one, we're going to do some community building in just a minute, and I'll instruct you as to how we're going to do that. Two, we're going to listen to one another's perspectives about community violence. We're going to share that qualitative data. And number three, we're going to hear about solutions and explore which ones we want to begin. But before we do those things, it is my honor and pleasure to bring up one of my dearest friends, my coworker. He describes himself sometimes as the oldest living alkalite of Salem Leadership Foundation. And when we were putting this program together, we thought, who has a great voice and credibility to speak to both the neighborhood associations and the faith community? And we thought, well, there's probably one person that exemplifies that. So welcome, Mr. Sam Skillern.
Thank you. As Kyle said, he's the incoming executive director at Salem Leadership Foundation, which I guess makes me the obsolete executive director at Salem Leadership Foundation. But I ain't done yet. All the way through the end of this year, you're stuck with me in venues like this. So totally honored to be here. Hey, do you guys realize that we get to live in a city called Peace and Well-Being, Oregon? Right? You thought it was named Salem, Oregon. Well, it is. Salem is derived from the word shalom. That's the Jewish, the Hebrew version of the word. In other cultures, salam, there's other variations, but it's this really cool word that doesn't just mean peace, the absence of conflict. It means completeness, wholeness, health, prosperity, well-being. It's this really cool term. And our city is named Shalom. Shalom Kaiser, Oregon. What a cool place. Now, it isn't all peace and well-being, and that's why we're here tonight. But think just for a minute of all the good that is happening in our community. There's a lot of good happening in this community because people of faith and people of goodwill come together all the time to create good outcomes in our neighborhoods. We have a tough history here, and we're not going to go into that tonight, but for 120 years, the Oregon Constitution required that all the institutions of care and incarceration be located in Salem, Oregon, or Marion County. Now, by a legislative decree, you could build a prison in Pendleton, which we have, or a mental health facility in Klamath Falls, but by default, everything was supposed to be in Salem and Marion County. That was lifted in the late 70s, early 80s, but the legacy of that is here. The Oregon State Hospital, Fairview Training Center, the deaf school, the blind school, 8 prisons at one time. We're down to 5. That's a move in the right direction. But Salem is a magnet for people with needs. They either come here for help or a judge sends them here. Oh my gosh, Sam, you're really bumming me out, man. Now the cynic or the pessimist would say, what a curse. What a millstone around the neck of a city to have that kind of a history. Well, we like to believe that God must have known something about the people who would choose to live in Shalom Kaiser, Oregon, that they would be the kind of people who would care about their neighbor, who would love their neighbor as self. And yes, if they had struggles, which we all do, if they had challenges, if they were in an institution or incarcerated or involved in the system or needed help, that if they were in Salem Kaiser, Oregon, there's good people here who want to help. So I just wanted to start that with a little bit of history. I am a history buff. So don't get bummed out about our history. Be inspired about our history, that we live in a place called peace and well-being, and we have an opportunity, including tonight, to build the shalom of our community. It's been a long, hard day for everyone, and we just ate, so I think we need to get our blood flowing a little bit. So bear with me, but we're going to do some calisthenics. So everybody get your arms loose. You don't have to stand up, but I want you to get your arms loose, and we're going to go like this, okay? There's your first move right there, okay? All right. And then we're going to go like this. Like this. Get them even. Get them back up again. Okay, you feeling the burn? You feeling the burn? Good. Get it back down here. Ray's sweating over here. So one more time. Get it nice and high, and we'll get it right down here. Now remember that all night long, because as a community, all communities have this, including Shalom, Oregon, us and them versus we. The human heart and many of the way that the world operates is us and them. I have, you don't. I believe, you don't. I have a house, you don't. I speak English, you don't. I'm this color, you're that color. I've never been in jail, you've been incarcerated, right? Us and them is just part of what's built in. And us and them doesn't work very well. We got to get to we. And tonight's conversation, what we're going to learn from our speakers and from one another is, and many of us are already on the journey, and many of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but for others, this might be more of a new construct. What in the heck is he doing with his arms? But how do we move as a community, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our places of work and worship? How do we move from a heart posture of us and them to we? It's easy to say people who are shooting and being shot are the thems. They fill in the blank. They fill in the blank. They probably fill in the blank. They came from fill in the blank. I don't ever want to know them because they scare me, right? We got to go from us and them to we. That is the antidote. That is the solution, not just to gun violence, but to all that ails us in the city of Shalom. And so just kind of remember that burn in your shoulder as we make our way through the evening. We're going to move from us, we're going to talk about ways that we can move from us and them to we. We've been here before. Many of you remember the Gang Intervention Task Force, the mid-90s. There was an uptick in gang activity and violence. It was the reason Salem Leadership Foundation was formed, because when the community had a crisis and it reached out to the entire community, all the sectors, there was one group missing, and it was the faith community. And the late, great Peter Courtney said, I need the faith community, I need the churches and other houses of worship with us to address this gang issue. And so we were one of the many outcomes of a group just like us who came together 25 years ago to say, what do we do about this crisis? What do we do about gang activity and gun violence? Oh my gosh, it's really hard. And crime went down 30%. And no problem ever goes away, but just as Ben will share in Oakland, if we work together with prevention activities to help people not get off the tracks, intervention activities to help when somebody is starting to get into or is in crisis, and then restoration. How do we welcome people back from addiction recovery? How do we welcome people back from incarceration? How do we go from us and them to we with prevention, intervention, and restoration? The reason things go like this is because we take our foot off the pedal, and there's other crises and other things come up. And so we had a violence issue 25 years ago, and then a foster care issue, and we took care of it. 1,200 kids were in foster care back in the early 2000s. There's still too many today, but it's cut in half. It's more like 600-ish. When a community, right, DA? I know Paige is here tonight. We worked as a community to bring violence down and to bring the need for foster care down, and we can do it again. And we're going to hear tonight from our speakers and at our tables how we can work together, not leave it all to the professionals, not leave it all to the system, but we, everyday average folks who live in Shalom, Oregon, learning how to go from us and them to we can get her done in our neighborhoods. My last comment is, raise your hand if you're here as part of a neighborhood association. Neighborhood associations aren't special. We're not patting ourselves on the back. I urge and plead and ask all of you to consider getting involved in your neighborhood association. It's one way to do what we're going to talk about tonight, but, oh, they're boring. There's only 5 people who are cranky and don't want anything to happen. That's because you're not there. That's because you're not there. So please, this is my little public service announcement. Get involved in your neighborhood association. I've been honored and privileged to be on the board at Grant Neighborhood Association for almost 25 years now, and we get things done. And the folks who raise their hand, again, we're not special or better, but let's work in our neighborhoods through that avenue. Ray, Kyle, rescue everybody, get us back on track.
Oh, hey man. You got it. Okay. Thank you. We encourage each other a lot, Ray and I. We've been friends a long time, so this is fun for us to do together. Okay, what we're going to do now around our tables, and we have a lot of tables, so this is great. There's lots of food. Eat the food. It's here for you. You can take it later. You can take it now. You can take it in the middle. It's fine. But what we're going to do, because we're about to head into times around our tables where we're going to share our thoughts and our perspectives about community violence. That can be a tense conversation. That can be, as one person has described it, creative conflict. The person who described it in those terms is a guy by the name of Patrick Lencioni that I love and have read most of his books. Some of you have read his books and you know. Really good stuff on leadership. One of the things that he says about creative conflict is that to actually engage in a good way about creative conflict is to have established trust before you do it. So we're going to build a little bit of trust around our tables before we engage in the creative conflict conversation. So the way we will do that is around your tables. And if there is like 2 people at a table, maybe join another table, because it'll be real short at your table if it's just 2 of you. So gather around tables, and you're going to answer 2 questions. Okay, the first question is, what's your name? That's probably the easy one. The second question is, or the thing that you're going to answer and share around your table is, what's your favorite childhood memory? Yeah. Or, what was a significant obstacle that you overcame in your childhood? You can share one or the other. Now, this is not a group therapy session, even though we do have some outstanding trained therapists in the house tonight. That's not what we're doing. We're just sharing our name, our favorite childhood memory, or an obstacle that you overcame in your childhood. So, as an example, my name is Kyle Dickinson, and my favorite childhood memory was the first time I drove over the Bay Bridge into San Francisco and saw a city for the first time, and it blew my mind. But it wasn't done, because that trip ended in Candlestick Park, where I saw the most green grass I'd ever seen in my life, and it was astonishing until the hot dog wrapper hit me in the face, because it's windy and cold in Candlestick Park. If you know, you know. So around your tables, please share your name, favorite childhood memory, or a significant obstacle that you overcame in your childhood. We're going to do this for 20 minutes, and then Ray's going to call us back. Go to your tables, share your things, go.
Well, I hope that, one, we got a little bit more acquainted together at the tables. We got to hopefully share some pretty impactful stories that make us who we are, that make us as a person, make us belong, make us thrive, and be able to recognize that and keep that perspective in mind as we consider how these discussions will continue throughout this evening, and the people that we're discussing, and the people that we want to serve, and the people that we want to be as well, because that's the same type of feeling we want to have collectively. But we have our police chief here tonight, and he has a few remarks that he would like to share with all of us tonight on reframing this conversation. So please give Chief Womack a hand.
Good evening, everyone. We'll see if I can flip pages with this mic in front of me here. Thanks for being here. My name's Trevor Womack, the police chief here in Salem. I can't emphasize enough how important these conversations are, and this one is here tonight. This is our last meeting in a series of meetings that we've had. And as your police chief, there's no really higher priority for me and our department than the physical safety and well-being of every member of this community, so this is our top priority. And the level of violence that we're seeing and we're experiencing is just intolerable. It's unacceptable for this community. It's a call to action for all of us as a community, and that's why we're here tonight. So again, this is a series of meetings. This is the last one, and we're talking about community violence, which is really about shootings primarily. That's what we're talking about, reducing shootings, which means saving lives in our community. That's why this is so important. But it's not about solutions that we're talking about by one single organization or one government agency. This is about solutions that are community-wide, that involve all of us. And if you've attended prior meetings, you've heard us talk about data. I'm going to touch on it very briefly. We know, for example, that shootings have been increasing for several years here in Salem, that juvenile involvement is on the rise in those shootings, that the victims and shooters involved in shootings have often prior contact with the criminal justice system, so they're not strangers to us involved in the criminal justice system. And the shootings are concentrated in relatively small geographic areas within our community also, which to me all says that this can be a manageable problem if we focus in the right ways. Also, we have more data analysis on our way soon coming from the Marion County side, so I appreciate you for that, sir. That data with ours will help us develop and build effective solutions based on the data. Focusing our attention and resources on reducing risk for the highest risk individuals in our community and also within the highest risk neighborhoods within our community is the key. It is the key. We have to stay focused. If you've attended prior meetings, you also know that there's been different focus areas. For example, 2 of the meetings have been in Spanish language only to engage our Spanish-speaking community. Tonight, we're here to, everyone's welcome, but we're engaging with our faith-based community. I've been doing this in law enforcement for a long time. Every effective solution to community crime problems that I've been involved in, the faith community is actively involved. It's an important stakeholder, and I'm glad we're here having this conversation tonight. Some folks mentioned the community working group that's been put together. I just want to talk about a little bit of membership and representation that's currently on that community working group. They planned and designed and organized these meetings, including the one tonight. I didn't design this meeting. It was a community group that designed this meeting. It included representatives from the Boys and Girls Club, Catholic Community Services, Church at the Park, Enlace Cross-Cultural Development Project, Luz del Valle Church, Salem Kaiser Public Schools, and city staff and the Salem Police Department, of course, also. I've attended all of the meetings so far. I've spoken briefly at each one, but mostly I listened. This is just about the police listening at this point. I listened to community members share their experiences and offer suggestions on how to reduce street violence. I've heard from mothers who lost sons, residents who witnessed people shot, stabbed, or otherwise assaulted in the community, employees who were robbed at gunpoint, neighbors who routinely hear gunshots from their neighborhood, school students and teachers and parents impacted by nearby shootings. So violence is affecting our entire community at some level, but for some, the violence is very up close and personal, and that's also why we're here tonight. I'm going to change my message a little bit tonight because I think it's important to recognize and highlight some of the law enforcement efforts that are already underway. I haven't done this before, but what I've heard through the series of meetings occasionally is that why are we sitting around having conversations and not taking action, which couldn't be any farther from the truth. Has anybody ever heard the term, I can walk and chew gum at the same time? Yes. Okay, we as a community and we as a criminal justice system partnership can walk and chew gum at the same time. So tonight I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the walking that's already happening on the criminal justice side. We're not sitting on our laurels. We're taking swift, effective action. I want to recognize our core partners, Marion County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Hunter. I see you back there, sir. Thank you. Relatively new to your position, but I appreciate your leadership so much. And as a partner, as 2 of the major law enforcement agencies, I value your partnership and your leadership a lot. Thank you, sir. Also, the district attorneys on both sides of the river, Marion and Polk. I see Paige here somewhere. Paige, where are you? Paige Clarkson, Marion County District Attorney, and Brendan Murphy also. Thank you for the partnership and the leadership. We couldn't ask for a stronger, more dedicated district attorney on this side, and I appreciate you, Paige, for being here tonight also. Marion, probation and parole. Thank you. Troy Gregg from the juvenile department. I don't know if Troy's here or not, but juvenile probation and the juvenile department is a key partner working with us on this issue, especially with regard to youth violence. And area chiefs of police from all over the county, including Kaiser Chief Copeland. And stepping back farther, our federal partners. We're actively engaged with all of our federal partners from ATF, FBI, DEA, U.S. Attorney's Office. And then there's my staff, who I'm most proud of. I know there's at least one of them here today. Deputy Chief Debbie Aguilar, raise your hand. Thank you, Debbie, for your leadership and work. So please know that all of these partners and the Salem Police Department, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. What I mean by that is we can take immediate action to intervene and hold violent offenders accountable within our community and bring justice to victims and their families, while at the same time engaging with our community and having a conversation to help identify new or expanded community-based resources that can come alongside us in the criminal justice system and help us solve this problem together. In fact, to be most effective, we have to do both. We have to do both. Police alone are not going to solve this problem. Arrests are an important part of the equation, of course, but they're necessarily just in a reactive approach. A crime's already been committed, a shooting's already occurred by the time we get involved and make an arrest. And with our limited resources, it's challenging and difficult for us to be involved on the prevention side of things. We're too busy caught up in being reactive. So before we have the important conversation that we're about to have tonight with you all, which, by the way, I talked about was designed by a group of community members, and before those folks and Ben McBride facilitate the conversation, and I sit down again and put my listening cap back on, I just want to thank the law enforcement professionals that are doing work to hold violent offenders accountable and bring justice to victims. I'm going to read a few examples also. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this, so I'll take a little bit more time. But before I read these examples of some of the work that we're talking about, I want to apologize in advance if anyone in the audience is connected to any of these crimes in a personal way. If you're related to or know one of the victims, or the crime otherwise affected your life directly, please know you have my sincere condolences. And it's not my intent to cause any further trauma, that's for sure. But I think it's important that we talk openly and frankly about what's really happening, the hard truth about what's really going on in our community, and the good work by law enforcement as we respond. On New Year's Day this year, a 29-year-old man was shot and killed outside a nightclub on Portland Road Northeast. This is before the sun rose on New Year's. We arrested the shooter 3 days later. On January 25th, just later that month, a 23-year-old man was shot and killed inside a vehicle on Cordon Road Southeast with the assistance of ATF partners. With very little to go on, we identified that shooter and had him arrested within just a few days. Within a month, we had that person in custody. On January 29th, we're still talking about January, 3 people were shot in a business parking lot on Market Street Northeast in the morning. We arrested 2 people for that shooting within days. And I'm sure you all remember, on March 7th at 1:45 in the afternoon, in broad daylight, which was the day after our first community violence intervention meeting, our kickoff meeting, Mayor, the very next day, 3 kids, 15 to 16-year-old boys, were shot near Bush's Pasture Park, one of whom was killed. 2 days later, the 16-year-old shooter, accompanied by a parent, turned himself in to us at the police department, and he was arrested and charged. In early April, 2 men were shot at Wallace Marine Park after 3 o'clock, just after 3 o'clock in the morning. One of them died. We arrested the shooter the next day. In May, after a lengthy investigation related to criminal activity that was occurring here in Salem, our detectives, along with the Marion County Sheriff's Department SWAT team, served a search warrant near Almsville, and there we arrested a convicted felon found in possession of a large amount of suspected fentanyl pills and 36 firearms that he's not allowed to possess. Just a few weeks ago, an afternoon dispute inside a gas station convenience store resulted in 1 man being beaten and shot in the head. Thankfully, he survived that injury. My officers were there within minutes. They found the suspect down the street and arrested him. We took him into custody. There have been incidents of gunfire all over town, but downtown as well. In one late night shooting at Riverfront Park, over 90 shots were fired between feuding groups. Vehicles and other property were damaged, including the Riverfront Carousel, but thankfully no one was injured. And that case remains an active investigation. So, things are happening. This is why we're really here tonight. This is why we have to walk and chew gum together at the same time. We need your help. Another quick set of facts just about the work that we're doing as a law enforcement collaborative. Part of our strategy has us focused on taking illegal guns off the streets and out of the hands of felons. So far this year, the Salem Police Department alone, we've seized 182 firearms connected to a crime. Just in 2024 so far. 45 of those guns were illegally possessed by a felon or another person that was barred from possessing a firearm. 7 of those guns were personally manufactured firearms known as ghost guns. We're also deploying advanced technologies, just one example here. We are now one of only 2 ballistic analysis hubs in the state of Oregon. We enter spent shell casings from crime scenes into the NIBIN system. It allows us to quickly connect crime guns from separate shootings across different jurisdictions, all over the Pacific Northwest and even across the country. This produces invaluable leads to pursue down during our shooting investigations. Just this year, to give you an idea, we've collected over 400 spent shell casings from crime scenes in the city of Salem, entered 200 different casings into the database for analysis, and received 29 different connections linking crimes together that were used with the same gun. These are invaluable leads that help us solve cases very quickly, not just us, but other agencies and jurisdictions where shootings are happening. So is there a growing street violence problem in Salem? Yes, for sure. Are the Salem Police Department and your partner law enforcement agencies responding swiftly and taking immediate action to intervene, solve cases, and successfully prosecute violent offenders? Absolutely, yes, we are. I say all of this just to reassure our community that your law enforcement professionals have made violence reduction a priority, and we're acting immediately, while at the same time having discussions with our community like the one tonight. We're all walking and chewing gum at the same time. So again, the police can't solve this problem alone. We typically get involved after violence occurred, and it's hard for us to get ahead of the problem with the prevention. So tonight, we're here to look at this problem together as an entire community, discuss ideas for new or expanded community-based prevention or intervention efforts. I'll touch on one quick other thing I've heard or learned along the way here. One of the discussions that's been happening at these community meetings has to do, or one of the ideas has to do with community night walks. We'll talk about that again tonight probably, community night walks. I've heard questions about whether such things are effective or even worthwhile. Some people think it sounds kind of silly. My answer is that if they're effective or not is absolutely yes. Any effort that increases positive community presence and activities in a high-risk neighborhood is valuable and worthwhile, especially just one small part of a broader strategy. The more, the better. Beyond the obvious risk reduction that occurs during the actual walk, can you imagine 100 citizens with white vests on walking through in a challenged neighborhood for a few hours on a Friday night? The odds of someone being shot in that area that night are almost nil. So there's obvious risk reduction during that period. But beyond that, the planning, the lead up, the preparation that brings community members together, like right now in this room, and the relationship we're building that it creates, it builds stronger community. Building stronger community is what prevents violence and crime and keeps us all safer. So yes, it's effective. Any effort, whether it's night walks, whether it's community barbecues at the park. Where's Eduardo? Sir, thank you. Fun Fridays, we're joining you in that effort. It's examples like that that bring community together and reduce risk in high-risk areas. Whether it's that, whether it's National Night Out, we just had 100 community events across Salem on National Night Out. Whether it's neighborhood watch groups, whether it's any kind of similar get-together, yes, it's effective and it's worthwhile. It's not a silly conversation to have. This is a great conversation to have. It's helpful and it's worthwhile. So tonight, bring your perspectives, your ideas, and suggestions to the table. This is a solvable problem if we all work together and we remain open to the widest array of strategies, again, big or small. The important thing is to engage, be here, be part of the conversation, contribute to the solution, and not sit on the sidelines and wait for someone else to improve safety for us and our neighbors. The fact that you're even here tonight shows your willingness to be a part of that solution, and for that, as your police chief, I'm extremely grateful and appreciative. So thank you again for being here tonight. I'm going to put my listening cap back on and learn something. Thank you.
Thank you for setting the stage and framing the conversation and continuing to do so. The realness of why we are here and also the realness of what's going on in our communities. One of the practices that we do in our house, and especially in something that's really heavy, is take a deep breath. So, deep breath in, breathe out. One more time, deep breath in, breathe out. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also a data nerd, so I appreciate all the data talk. And if y'all are also any data nerds, anybody who's like, yeah, well, show me the numbers. Show me the numbers. Anybody? No? All right. Thank y'all. Got my peoples. The city of Salem does have a website that has a lot of the data articulating what has been done already with the surveys and the conversations and the data points surrounding this discussion. So while already discussed, qualitatively, which is what we do today, this is the data point, but also quantitatively can help in framing the discussion as well. You can find that information on the website. It's not on the top of my head, but I guarantee you if you search for it, you'll find it and you'll get the data and then that notes too. So tonight, we will have some discussions about how we experience community violence or the concerns that we as a people feel, how we feel vulnerable to experiencing community violence. We are not here to demonize anyone. Sam, thank you for the imagery of us and them. Thank you for the imagery. I love that you continue that. And you're throwing me off by not wearing a vest too, by the way. We're not here to demonize anyone. We are neighbors. We want to fix this challenge together and continue to do that work together. So we also want to think about what we can do now and what we can do to help that work effort and determine new ideas we can do along the way as a city as we increase belonging here.
Yep. So if you look at the screen, you'll see a couple of prompts for our discussion and listening tonight. Tonight we want to interact with each other about impact. At your table and tables, this is going to be a little, well, it's not tricky. We can figure this out. We figured out other things before. We've got these butcher paper things with pens standing on thingamawhatsits. That's what they're called, right, Angie? Thingamabobbers. I apologize. Thingamabobbers. And we're actually going to have our discussions around these types of things. So I'm going to give instructions in just a moment. But the questions that we're going to have you consider in your discussion groups are these. Number one, how is community violence impacting your faith community or the neighborhoods where you either live, work, or worship? And the second question is, what ideas can be a part of the strategies that your community is either already doing or would be willing to do? So again, the questions, how is community violence impacting your faith community or the neighborhood where you live, work, or worship? And two, what ideas can be a part of the strategies that your community is already doing or would be willing to do? Those are the questions. They're going to be up on the board. Don't worry about it. But I need to give you a few ground rules for how to kind of have this type of conversation, because it's helpful to have just a sense of what are we trying to do here. So the first ground rule, please allow time for everyone to share, and let's listen well to each other, the people at our tables. We're asking each person to share for no more than 3 minutes and allow everyone to contribute. If you happen to have M&Ms with you, you can pass those out. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Oh, that's not the same as M&Ms. The second rule, let's abide by some norms of respecting each other's thoughts, even if we have a different perspective. That's the whole idea of we build trust before we engage in creative conflict or tension. We need to make sure that we share something that is related to the topic at hand so that we can gather input needed to be successful tonight. And we can practice something referred to as the step up / step back practice. That means if you normally don't speak up in these settings, we're asking you to speak up. And maybe if you're somebody that likes to speak up at these settings, first, maybe let some other folks speak first. And you know who you are. I don't have to point you out, but I might later. The last rule, there is also someone who'll be taking notes around these tables areas with the butcher paper that's on top of the thingamabobber. Where's Angie? There you are. That's for you. They're going to be taking notes. They're not going to be writing down your name. They're not going to be capturing any kind of personal information. All they're going to be doing is tracking with the conversation so that we can deliver this information to the Salem Police Department, helping out with community solutions. So let's put those questions back up there on the screen. They're up there. Close enough. Okay, and what I need you to do now is, if you are a table host facilitation person, would you just stand up? And please move to a board that has a pen. And let's try to divide this somewhat evenly. We're going to need to have a station right over here that's facilitating a couple of tables. There's going to be some over here. There's some in the back that are over there. And this is going to be a little bit chaotic because there's a lot of us, and that's good. All right? So, table host, discussion leaders, you are engaging with your groups around how is community violence impacting faith community in the neighborhood where you live, work, and worship? And 2, what ideas can be part of the strategies that your community is already doing or would be willing to do? That is your topic. Discuss.
All right. So the wonderful thing about what we just did is the fact that we converse together as a community on ideas and efforts and initiatives that we feel that we can do collectively. One of my favorite things to think about and consider is that we can control what we can control, right? And we can control a lot of things within our scope of control. I think you mentioned Patrick Lencioni. Stephen Covey talks about that quite a bit in the first chapter of his book, of the things, what's in our circle of control and circle of influence. And so what we just did just now is that element to see within our circle of control and influence, how can we make an impact within our community? So thank you for doing that. And I recognize too that we have some folks that will want to share. Hold it real quick, because we'll have a time towards the end where Kyle will give you more specific instructions of what we're going to share and report out as a group, so we all can hear some of the great conversations we've had during our table times. Sound good? Sound good? Thank you. Yes. Yeah, you get an amen. All right. Without further ado, I would like to bring up Ben McBride, who is our consultant who's helped us quite a bit in the behind-the-scenes work with setting this up and other conversations beyond this work. And he had results in his city that led to near 50% reduction, and he began to, as a volunteer faith leader in meetings like this just a short 15 years ago. So can we give a hand for Ben McBride, please?
All right. If you're ready to do something about peace, say yeah. If you really want to do something and create safety in Salem, say yeah. You ready to get off the couch and stop asking the police to do something and do something yourself, say yeah. All right, I'm in rah-rah mode tonight a little bit, all right? We have made it to this third event, and I want to tell you that it is time for us as community to think about the contribution we can make to ensure that our communities are safe. And I want you to repeat after me. Say, everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. Say, everybody has to do something. So the question I want you to be asking is, so what's the something that I need to be doing? What's the something that my church can be doing? My temple, my mosque, my synagogue, my neighborhood association. What's the thing that we can do to ensure that we get safety here in Salem? I want to say something that might sound radical. It is not normal for cities to be ravaged by community violence. Now, community violence is a very specific kind of violence, all right? It's not domestic violence. That's the kind of violence that happens in a house, right? It's not certainly vehicular violence, right? It's kind that happens in a car. Community violence is the kind of violence that usually happens between people who don't know each other, that are actually engaging with one another in the public space. And it's that kind of violence, usually with guns, sometimes with knives or others, but the kind of community violence that we want to focus on tonight is about community gun violence. That is the kind of violence that we are thinking about around how we're going to show up and be a part of the story. Now let's give it up one more time for Chief Womack and the comments he made on the front end. Now, Chief knows he and I have actually known each other for over a decade in this work of doing violence prevention across the country, finding ways to address police-community relationships across the country. So I deeply respect the chief, but I'm gonna say something, and the chief is gonna smile. The chief's responsibility is to do all the things that he just said when he was up here. Arrest folks. Make sure that people who are committing crimes are held accountable. Make sure that people who are harming and hurting others are held responsible and they are removed from the community. Everybody say, that's his job. Now I want to tell you what our job is. Our job is to put the homicide division of the Salem Police Department out of business. Oh man, y'all ain't talking to me, man. I thought I had some real peacemakers in the room tonight. Everybody say, our job is to put the homicide division out of business. That should be making somebody excited, right? I don't want to sit around and wait for the homicide detectives to solve crimes over dead bodies that you and I, with our institutions and our relationships, can intervene and keep people alive. Are y'all hearing that? In these community violence intervention strategies, law enforcement is one major component. That is enforcement. But there are many other tactics necessary, and when this listening session is done, if y'all really want to get down with the get down, as we like to say where I'm from, if y'all really want to get serious about this work, then we can really start investing in learning about the other 4 to 5 components outside of law enforcement, where you really got to get good about finding your place in the work to help reduce violence. But I'm going to tell you right now, you don't reduce violence on the couch. You don't reduce violence on social media. You don't reduce violence complaining with public comment at meetings. You reduce violence by getting up, figuring out what your something is to do, and transforming the story in your city. And I'm not just a witness of this. Pastor Rob, who is the pastor of his church, I'm putting him on blast. Pastor Rob was in Boston as a younger man, probably when his hair didn't have so much gray in it. When the people who trained me in this work of violence reduction had what they called the Boston Miracle in, what was that, the mid-'80s? 2001. So I want us to hold this notion that the work that we are talking about has witnesses. People who have seen this work happen over and over again to save lives. I'm going to talk to us about one tactic and then pass it off to our sister about another tactic, and then we're going to ask you to start thinking about what are you really ready to do. I ain't talking about talk about it. I'm not talking about complain about it. I'm talking about what are you really ready to do. The Center for Disease Control said in 2005 that every time there's a homicide in a city, it costs $1 million for everybody that is killed in a city. The cost to the whole city, the police department, the hospital department, the city infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. It costs $1 million every time there is a homicide. The RAND report came out with a report in 2013 that said that they also feel like it's that, but they believe that it's closer to $3 million. Every time there's a homicide. Here's what we've learned over the years. If we are willing to wrap around services, relationships, resources, those who have access to jobs, providing jobs, if we will use targeted strategies, we can usually get people who are at risk to either commit an act of violence or be a victim of violence to get out of the risk level for usually around $75,000 to $80,000 worth of investment. $1 million for a dead body, $75,000 of time and resources to keep somebody alive. So the question is, we know what the cost of death is. Are we willing as Salem to invest in the cost for peace? So I want to talk to you about this one tactic called a call-in. This is the first time we've talked about this tactic, and it's one that if you all are willing here in Salem to lean into this, we're going to help support you in figuring out how to implement this tactic. Everybody say a call-in. What a call-in is, and I'm going to read the points very quickly, it's where we determine who are those that are at the highest risk to either pick up a gun and shoot at someone, or they are at risk to be shot by someone, and we invite them quarterly to a table in a church like this. We sit them down at the table, people who may have been shooting at each other or in conflict with one another. And at that same meeting, we have a mother who's lost her child to violence. We have law enforcement there. We usually have the district attorney there. We have faith leaders there. We have folks who used to be involved in the violence who have changed their lives there. And we have what we call a carrot and stick approach. We have a conversation with them and say, we want you to make a different decision with your life. And if you're willing to do that tonight, we dismiss law enforcement and we have business owners and social services and all the community come around these individuals and help them change their life that night. We case manage them. We coach them. We come alongside them. We invite them to Thanksgiving and Christmas and Eid and Hanukkah or whatever else you celebrate. We walk with them, we talk with them, we buy their kids diapers, and we walk with these individuals back into healthy life. What we have found through call-in strategies across the country is when we lean into this and get everybody from every side of the story, focusing on those at the highest risk, 7 out of 10 individuals that come to that meeting change their lives, put their firearms down, and move towards a more restorative lifestyle. Are y'all hearing this? This is science now that is studied across this country. But the question is, are we willing, business owners, church leaders, education leaders, nonprofit leaders, all willing to come together and gather around the individuals in our communities at the highest risk, not to other them and criminalize them, but to protect them, to restore them, and to help their lives become the lives that they were always destined to be. I'm going to show you a quick 3-minute video, a success story of someone who walked into one of these call-in meetings probably 10 years ago at this point, who's now changed their life.
Man, you know, the old me, man, the only way I could describe the old me, man, was a scandalous type individual, man. I did anything to survive to the best of my being. I sold crack, I sold weed, I robbed people, I shot dice, I lied for money, I connived for money, Needless to say, the old me was horrible. From the earliest I can remember, I could say about 11, 12. I used to always tell my foster mama, like, man, I ain't gonna live to see 25. My turning point, believe it or not, really came through a situation that I had with my wife, my ex-wife. It was a misdemeanor, but it landed me on probation. I was avoiding going to the classes, the domestic violence classes or whatever you call it. I was avoiding them as long as I could. My probation officer called me close to my court date and was like, the only way I could save you is if I put you in this program, that probation fund. But make a long story short, I walked into the meeting, heard what the people had to say. They said it was there for us. Which was very interesting, and when I started paying attention is that they made the police leave the room. And they got all these people, some of the people I seen in Oakland before, they was called community members. And they said that they was there to help. Being totally honest, I don't think nobody wants to sell drug and commit crime, man. Everybody wants a way out. You feel me? Like, that's the name of the game. Like, eventually you hustle so you can get out. So I talked to the community members and they offered me some opportunities like getting health care, help filling out job applications. While I was there, I met a dude named Emilio Mena and some dude named Ben McBride was there. And at that meeting, I told Ben McBride, I don't know how or what it's gonna take, but he gonna help me get my life together. I was really talking out the side of my neck, but I told that man that, and he heard me loud and clear. And he offered me a job opportunity with Pico, California. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what community organizing was. He told me I was the perfect person for the job. I took the opportunity and ran with it. I mentioned these two because these two put more energy in my life than I was able to put in my own life.
So I want us to hold this. Jabari was somebody that people said the only way that he was going to change was to be removed from the community, to be incarcerated, to be locked up because he was a criminal. He is now a leading peacemaker for the city of Seattle, saving people's lives all across that region in the Northwest because he came to a call-in. The question I want to know is if y'all are committed to facilitating and hosting call-in tables. Let's get all the loved ones here at Salem to the table who are at risk so we can let them know that we don't want them locked up in a jail somewhere. We don't want them put outside the community. We want them welcomed back into the community so that they can be the successful individuals long-term to be a part of the Salem peace lifestyle that each one of us want to be a part of it. Are y'all committed to that? So the call-ins are one tactic that churches, businesses, school districts, social service organizations do, and police are only a part of the strategy. But the police cannot be a part of a strategy if the community is not committed to do the strategy. So the call-in is one tactic that we lift up, and the second tactic that goes alongside the call-in tactic is called the Peace Night Walks, right? You see kind of the talking points that are here on the video, and there are already leaders in your community who have already begun to take steps to move forward on the night walk. So I want y'all to make some noise for Abby Ingalls, who's going to come up right now and talk about the night walks that are getting ready to get started here in Salem.
Hey friends, I did not realize I was going to get quite the introduction, so thank you. I am Abby Ingalls. I am a pastor on the east side of Salem, and some Salem pastors and community leaders have been meeting for a while to plan some walks, and we did one and learned a lot, and the next one will be 1 week from today. I will have some flyers and I'll be at the back door. I'd love to answer any questions, talk to you about it, and yeah, let's be present and engage our neighbors and do this together.
All right, everybody say, go Abby. Go Abby. You see, I'm hyping you up. See, I'm being your hype man up here, right? So as she's lifting up in these peace walks, right, it's going to bring us all together. It's going to create opportunities for us to connect with one another, and it's going to be a weekly space, hopefully, if we really get behind this, where we gather together to learn about community violence work, to get active for what it is that we can do, and get off the couch and get busy doing it. Everybody say, we keep us safe. You understand that? Say it again. Say, we keep us safe. That includes the police department. Everybody say, we keep us safe. So it's all of us working together to make sure we do this. So the call-ins and the peace night walks are the two tactics that right now the city is considering, but it needs the community to say, we are behind this strategy or that strategy, or we're committed to figure out how we can leverage ourselves to be a part of it. So we're getting ready. I'm going to toss us back over to our hosts that are going to give us some instructions about what's next, but I want to finish again with this quote. Say, everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. Say, everybody's got to do something. Now I'm going to turn you into a black church. Now look at the person next to you and tell them, what are you going to do? Go look at the person on the other side. Say, what are you going to do? Look across the table. Now I'm really about to turn you into a black church. Say, neighbor, what are you going to do?
I don't know how you follow up that. Like, man, I love the energy. I love the energy. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much, Abby. What I love is the fact that things are happening. Like, it's continuing to happen, and it's continuing to grow. And just like it's been stated, we have a hand in making us safe and keeping our community safe. So as I turn it back to you all, we're going to have a quick session to talk a little bit about some of these tactics that were discussed. And I want to know, at your tables, which one interests you? Peace walks or the call-in? Thank you. I'm like blanking on the term. Peace walks or call-in, which one interests you as something that you in your faith community or neighborhood association can get behind? So these are the questions that we would love for you all to kick around at your tables for the next few minutes, and then Kyle's going to be the one to bring y'all back together, all right? So let's go ahead and have the discussion now. In the interest of time, we're going to once again bring us together. And as I stated before, two things I stated. One, that Kyle was going to be the one to do this, and that didn't happen. He said, Ray, you go out there and try to calm the crowd and tell them to hush. I don't know why. Thank you, Kyle. But what we do want to have happen is that conversation that you're having at our tables, we want to bring that out so everybody can have a chance to hear what has been discussed and what has been your takeaway tonight. So if you are a table discussion facilitator, I would love for you to rise up, slide on over to this microphone over here on stage right. And here's the prompt, all right? Here's the prompt. Please listen closely. This is an opportunity to share one idea, either an impact, an idea, what the discussion about the call-ins or the peace walks. What is ruminating at your tables? And try to summarize that for us in 90 seconds. Ooh. Ooh. We got 90 seconds. I could be that guy with the timer. We'll get that going. But if you are that person, please make your way over to the microphone. Line on up, line on up. All right. Because I am a person working on accountability, I am getting myself ready to time. I know what 90 seconds is. Okay. Are we ready? Are we ready to listen? Wow. Y'all gave so much energy to Ben. I can't get no energy too. Y'all ready to listen? Hey, I'm not mad. I'm not jealous. Okay, go ahead.
One thing that came up at our table was one of the impacts of violence was fear at the individual level and at the community level, and that fear naturally leads to isolation and divisiveness, and that the remedy for all those things is simply connection
Yes.
and community at the individual one-on-one level and at the broader level.
Well said.
It was a good group.
Thank you. Wonderful. Good.
I also had a good group, but we did tally marks, and we chose the night walk as our preferred idea that we could get behind and support, mainly because we didn't understand call-in beyond actually calling in and reporting something. We had a couple people on the fence, but we liked the idea of the night walk, and we went and grabbed some flyers from Abby, and you can expect to see us there, at least my table.
All right. Good. Thank you.
I was at the same double table here, but I'll throw out some other items. One person suggested that anything that brings life into the community pushes out. Pushes out. Anything that brings life into your area, into the community, pushes out the destructive element. That one suggestion was putting a basketball hoop up, because people are coming together for that, are gonna be less interested in contaminating that area. People who have a garden there, it's got beauty, and it brings people together in a common effort.
Well, I was with this wonderful table over here, and to just kind of summarize, I think fear was one of the largest impacts that we talked about from the gun violence. We talked about the safety and when people don't feel safe and the ways that that can spiral and is a huge impact. And our ideas, there were lots of ideas. One, we talked about beautification as well. Those who, when people see that things look good, it's like, okay, we want this thing to continue to look well. And when things might look bad, it's like, well, we don't care very much, or maybe it actually gets worse. And so what does beautification around our neighborhood look like? We talked about the collaborative efforts of whether that's a neighborhood watch or a neighborhood association or a family council or a community partnership team, but all of those are collaborative forces, neighbors coming together to work together. And that is probably it. And we talked about probably both night walks and call-ins. There was interest in both of those. Thanks.
We had a great table over here too, right here. I think one of the things that hasn't been said that we really focused a lot on was the prevention ways of trying to look at what are some alternatives to especially young people who are getting involved in gangs and violence, and what can the community offer to help develop alternatives. That was one of the themes that we talked a lot about, and it kind of went along with the call-in type of strategy. We kind of want to learn a little bit more about that in terms of, it seems like it would take a lot of organization, but having, community resources available, but mentoring, young folks, how to get that organized, how to help kids be involved in things like Young Life or sports and activities that can help them feel belonging. And so we talked, a lot about the sort of precursors to this kind of violence and also other forms of violence in the community and how to prevent those. So that was a big part of what we talked about. And there was also some interest in learning more about the walks and what they would do in the community too. So we kind of looked at both things being important.
I was with that FAR group in the back, and one of the things that we identified as an impact of crime is there's an increase in stigmatization of those members who live in communities that are impacted in crime, and how that causes an isolation and a prejudice towards the members of those communities. So one of our ideas that we came up with to help negate that was the use of community organizations and different community member groups to create affinity groups so that we can get to know one another, that we can connect back to our neighbors and begin to break down those walls of stigmatization that happens when violence and crime happens in our neighborhoods. And we actually had a member at our table who participated in the recent Peace Walk, and so she got to share some of the pictures. And I think that got our group excited about being involved in the Peace Walks, but we really would like to do both. One of the things that was discussed is how the involvement in the Peace Walks brings visibility so that when we do the call-ins, we have increased participation and increased involvement so that we can use those moments to truly impact those who are coming to us for connection and resources. That was our group.
Our group, the thing that stuck out most to me is that the impact is just a general feeling of hopelessness, whereas in the past in our communities and neighborhoods when we talk about Salem and living here and how great it was, it just doesn't feel like that anymore. And so kind of the reputation of Salem maybe is going down, and that makes us feel sad. And we talked about that for kids in schools, when there is violence in their schools, it gives their school maybe a reputation of not being as great of a school as we all know it is. One of my favorite ideas for the idea portion that we talked about is, we're talking about the neighborhood associations here, but we wondered if the neighborhood associations were necessarily trained to have the conversations around the prevention of violence, and if they're trained and equipped to have those conversations that they need to have with their neighbors about conflict, because that can be really challenging. So I personally was excited about that idea as a way to train up our neighborhood associations. Yeah, thanks.
Bueno, nosotros estuvimos en una mesa fabulosa, mucha participación.
We were at a great table. We had a lot of participation.
El impacto que notamos en nuestra mesa fue la separación de familias.
The impact that we spoke about in our table was the separation of families.
Miedo alrededor y la inseguridad en nuestros hijos.
Fear of our surroundings and also the insecurity for our kids.
Falta de libertad de salir durante el día.
We have less freedom of going out in the day.
Por ese motivo, a veces las familias cuando salen a eventos prefieren retirarse a temprano por ese temor que tienen de estar alrededor.
Because there is fear, the families that do go out to different events, they leave early because of the fear that they have.
La vigilancia, cuando uno sale en familia, siempre estás mirando alrededor, ¿qué está sucediendo? Estás atento.
The fact that we're always vigilant. When you go out with your family, you're always alert, looking at your surroundings. That means less time for your family.
Las ideas en las que estuvimos conversando el grupo fue tener más deportes comunitarios para los jóvenes de 13 a 18 años.
One of the ideas that we spoke about in our groups was to have more sports, community sports for kids from the ages of 13 to 18.
Especialmente para estas familias que son de bajos ingresos.
Especially for families of low income.
Tener más centros comunitarios para la familia completa.
To have more community centers for the whole family.
Más educación acerca sobre la asociación de vecindarios.
More education about neighborhood associations.
¿Qué tipo de oportunidades y cómo uno puede acercarse a esas asociaciones?
We want to learn what kind of opportunities are available at these associations and how we can get involved.
acercarnos a la comunidad latina, especialmente usar los recursos que tenemos alrededor.
Let's get closer to our Latino community and let's have them be able to use the resources that are available.
Por ejemplo, tenemos la radio en español, la televisión en español.
For example, radio or TV in Spanish, right?
Lo que queremos es acercarnos también a la comunidad y que se sientan seguras en nuestros vecindarios, nuestros hijos y los jóvenes.
We want to get closer to our communities. We want our communities to feel safe, our kids, our teenagers.
Gracias.
Thank you.
So at our table, we talked about how the scriptures and science and Church at the Park teach us that human pain and suffering comes from broken relationships with God and with each other. And so that to lead, as was said by Pamela, to lead with love and light and dignity and the simple act of asking a name and sharing stories, I mean, these are the first steps we can take. There were 3 things that were talked about that we want to know more about. Pastor Tim talked about what we called the McMinnville model. Ben, they did a walk thing down in downtown McMinnville on Friday and Saturday nights. Not necessarily against gun violence, but just to kind of bring light into the downtown area and help it become healthy. So we thought we should study that model. Number 2, to replicate what's been happening with the neighborhood family councils with these fun Fridays, especially in Northgate Park. Again, bringing light and families and hope into the park. And it's not driving out evil people, but it is driving out dark acts. And so how can we have more of that activity, especially with murals, not just merely painting graffiti out with recycled paint, good, but how do we do it with, right, Lynn, with art and murals and bring that in? And then the third thing was, to what degree can, I'm not saying they're absent tonight, but there are friends in the tourism, hospitality, and chamber communities, because there's an economic impact. It's not as important as the human impact, but there's an economic impact on our community when things aren't light.
So we had 2 passionate and very caring tables that gave us a lot of input. The impacts around gun violence that were expressed were the drug activity, hearing yelling and gunshots at night and not knowing exactly where it was coming from, graffiti, and that just creating a general sense of fear. The group talked about building relationships and addressing concerns with neighborhood associations and faith-based community, and embracing the entire community and participating in the success of individuals that are struggling. So one of the comments was not to let fear control us, and to move beyond that. I've got to rely on my notes. Sorry. So the group was interested in engaging youth at all ages through the faith-based and other communities, and also the question was, how can those programs be funded? They wanted to decrease recidivism and have honest discussions with the community to work together. Thank you.
Hello. Getting to go last means I get to probably say a bunch of stuff that was already repeated, but where I grew up in my faith, I was told that when the Bible repeats itself, it's something you should pay attention to. So a lot of what we talked about was ways that we've noticed in the faith communities and in neighborhood associations and other places across town where it is too easy to fall into that trap of us and them. In the wake of things that have happened. So for example, the incident that happened in South Salem at Bush Pasture Park, a neighborhood association in the wake of that disrupted into like, we don't want those people in our community, and it was us versus them. And I think it was Superintendent Castañeda, she said, what does it look like to get people like that together and talk about things before they happen and make sure that everybody understands what it looks like to be us together when those incidences happen? And I added the church should do the same thing. If you're in a faith community, what does it look like for your church to know what it looks like when there's a community-wide event that impacts people negatively? What does it look like to respond, and do we have a plan? A lot of that looked like stuff that's already been said, affinity groups, training neighborhood associations, stuff like that. And I think that leads into stuff like the call-in and the peace walks. Because without the peace walks, you're not familiar faces and part of those communities where that stuff is happening, and you're not a trusted person to invite them to a call-in. Without those trainings, you don't have the resources at the call-in to aid them anyways. So I'm at the risk of repeating a bunch of things. Everything that's been said tonight should be listened to and talked very seriously about. I think that we can do this.
Whew. How y'all feeling? Yeah? Hopeful? Inspired? I hope so. The best advice I ever got on being a parent to teenagers is to keep the conversation going. No matter what they tell you, and they will tell you things, keep the conversation going. Let's keep this conversation going, and we have some specific actions that we need to consider and we need to take part in. We mentioned a couple of them tonight. There are plenty of strategies that we can keep the conversation going around. There is an opportunity next Thursday night to go on the Peace Walk. We are going to meet at 7 p.m. in the parking lot at Big Lots on Lancaster. There is going to be a 15-minute training before we go on the walk. So if you are having the sense of like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What's going to go on? And the anxiety is rising with you, that's normal. It's okay. Hold hands with that anxiety and show up at 7 p.m. to receive a training. And some of your anxiety, maybe not all of it, will subside as we walk together. We have shirts that say Peace Walk Salem, so you'll know where to find us. They're white t-shirts that we want to be able to deliver to folks as we go on this walk, as we offer ourselves in many ways as just a gift of presence. That's next Thursday. We need these walks to happen all over our city so that there is presence beyond just the area around the Big Lots parking lot on Lancaster Avenue. We need these walks in West Salem. We need them in North Salem. We need them in South Salem. We need leaders to step into these places and say, I will organize that walk. We'll hold it here. Can you provide us with t-shirts and training and where to go? Yes, we can, and we will. If you are inspired and hopeful and you live in one of the neighborhoods that I mentioned or the areas around town that I mentioned, please come and talk to me. We'd love to be able to empower you to lead in this way. The vision for the Peace Walks is that they would happen every single week at a different neighborhood around our city. So we'd have 4 of them happening a month, 1 in each location. We've got 1 of them. We need 3 more. We are the people we've been waiting for. We are the people we've been waiting for. We have all the resources we need in this room to make this happen. Let's make this happen. Thank you for being here. This has been a joy. Go in peace. Good night.